The last thing I remembered before dying was the sight of Daniel Carter sneering at me, standing next to Vanessa Collins, the woman he'd loved all along, telling me with zero shame that he'd only married me to get into the steel plant, and that I, an ugly and uneducated country bumpkin, had never deserved him in the first place. He said I'd taken the spot that belonged to Vanessa, that I'd stolen 40 years of her life, and that now it was time to give it back. My heart broke, my vision blurred, and I dropped dead from rage, humiliated and betrayed by the man I'd loved and slaved for, who used me as a stepping stone, left me rotting in the village, and secretly raised 2 sons with his childhood sweetheart while I toiled in the fields for his parents, like some kind of disposable nanny. But fate wasn't done with me, because the next second I opened my eyes, I was lying in bed on the very day Daniel and his mother were planning to come to my house to propose. It was 1973 again. I had been reborn. My heart pounded in my chest, not with fear, but with clarity. This time, I wouldn't let history repeat itself. I heard his mother outside, laughing and flattering my mom, saying, "When Claire marries Daniel, she'll be treated like our own daughter," and I almost laughed out loud. I remembered how she used to praise me for jumping into the river to save the factory director, then turned around and mocked me for being stupid enough to dive into freezing water and ruin my health. They said I couldn't have kids because of that. And they were right. I gave up my body and youth for a man who never even saw me. Well, not this time. This time, I wouldn't be their backup plan. I'd help the lovebirds get together and watch them suffer without my godfather's help, without my factory job, without the ugly wife who worked herself to the bone so they could play house in the city. Just as Daniel and his mom were about to seal the deal, I walked out and said it clearly, "I don't agree to this marriage." My mom looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Claire, haven't you always had a crush on Daniel? He's tall, educated, went to high school for 2 years. He could have gone to college if the entrance exam wasn't canceled. You're turning down the best guy in the village." I knew what she meant. I'd been infatuated with Daniel in my last life, and everyone knew it. My dad even assigned their family all the easy jobs with high work points just to impress them. Every time we had meat, dumplings, or anything nice, it went to Daniel. They treated him like royalty. But that was over. I looked my mom in the eye and told her the truth. I saw Daniel sneaking around in the Reed Marsh with Vanessa Collins from the second production team. They'd been together for a long time. I said he only wanted to marry me because my godfather could get me a job at the steel plant, and once I was his wife, he'd take my spot. That's all I ever was to Hima's stepping stone. My mom's face turned ghost white, then red with fury. She stormed outside and screamed at Daniel's mom. "Your son's fooling around in the reeds with another woman, and now you have the audacity to propose marriage?" Daniel's mom tried to laugh it off, saying it was just a fling, that Daniel would break it off and treat me right after marriage. That if he ever dared mess around again, she'd break his legs. As if I didn't know how that story ended. I looked at Daniel, who wasn't even trying to hide his resentment. His eyes weren't pleading or apologetic. They were cold, angry, like he was being forced to give up his true love and settle for someone beneath him. I knew what was in Vanessa's belly. Their first son had already been born by this point in my last life. So I asked him, right there in front of everyone, "Daniel, you're about to marry me, so what about Vanessa and the baby she's carrying?" His face went white as a sheet. "How did you know she's pregnant?" he blurted. And that was it. The whole house went silent. His mom collapsed onto the stool behind her. My dad's jaw tightened. My mom grabbed a broom and chased them all out of the house. "You knock up a girl and come here trying to marry my daughter? You think I won't tell the commune? You think I won't drag your entire family into a public struggle session?" Daniel and his mother ran like their lives depended on it, and honestly, in that era, they kind of did. Getting an unmarried girl pregnant was no joke. You could lose everything, even your life. I thought that would be the end of it, but Daniel wasn't done being trash. To secure a chance at the steel plant, he actually convinced Vanessa to have an abortion. And her family didn't even make him take responsibility. That's when I started getting goosebumps. Was I still destined to repeat the same hell? In my past life, Daniel's mother forced me to drink all kinds of disgusting fertility remedies after my miscarriage. I became infertile, broken, ruined. And then Daniel lied, told me he'd hold the job at the steel plant for me while I recovered, then abandoned me in the countryside for the next 4 decades. I worked the fields while he lived the city life with Vanessa, spending my salary on her, dressing her in silk while I served his parents' leftovers and saved every egg. They told me they were visiting relatives in the city, when really they were seeing Daniel and their 2 secret grandsons. I lost my youth, my health, my dignity for that family. But this time, I rode straight to the commune, called my godfather, and confirmed my spot at the plant myself. When I walked out of the post office feeling 10 pounds lighter, I saw Daniel and Vanessa across the street. The moment he saw me, he flinched like I was fire. Vanessa turned pale and tried to spin it. "Claire, don't misunderstand. Daniel just brought me to buy supplies. We're separating. I had the abortion. You can rest easy. I'm not worthy of him." She actually cried, tears falling like pearls, and Daniel clenched his fists like he was the victim. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You've always liked me. Don't lie. You just wanted to force Vanessa to abort the baby. Well, you won. She's gone. I'll propose to you again after I settle her." Then Vanessa, that manipulative snake, clutched her stomach and fainted into his arms. Daniel screamed at me, "This is all your fault. You owe her. Come with us to the clinic, pay the bill, buy her sugar, canned food, milk powder, and bring her chickens and eggs for confinement." And just like that, I realized I'd been blind my entire past life. This man had no shame, no soul, and no sense of right and wrong. And I was done being a fool. I still remember the exact moment I saw the steel plant for the first time. It was massive, majestic, like a sleeping iron beast breathing smoke and fire into the sky, and I stood at the gate stunned, realizing this was the life I almost gave up in my previous one. My godfather greeted me warmly, took me through the workshops, and offered to arrange an easy clerical job or a childcare position at the factory-run kindergarten, but I shook my head. I couldn't read well and didn't want to risk screwing up someone else's kid just because I wanted comfort. I asked him to let me work in the field, in the workshops, with the machines and the real workers. He hesitated, but I insisted. That was probably the first real choice I made for myself in this life. I got assigned a master to train under, and turns out I had a knack for technical work. I wasn't book smart, but I was sharp. I learned quickly, remembered every instruction, and worked harder than anyone. In just 2 years, I went from an apprentice to a second-level worker, earning nearly 40 yuan a month, which was a big deal back then. I had a dorm, a spot in the canteen, access to the library and the auditorium, and for the first time in my life, I knew what opportunity actually looked like. I'd given it all up in my last life, handed it over to Daniel like a fool, and he used it to spoil Vanessa while I wasted away in the fields. But not this time. 2 years later, I got selected as an outstanding young worker and was recommended for further study at the Iron and Steel College in my hometown. It was like fate was making up for everything I lost. When I went home for a break to visit my parents, I saw the joy in their eyes. They were proud of me, truly proud. My mom said it with a kind of relief, like a wound that had finally started to heal. "Good thing you didn't marry Daniel back then. Look at where you are now." She told me he had gone absolutely crazy after I left, telling people I'd promised to marry him, that he gave me the job opportunity, and that I was supposed to take him with me and support his family, like some kind of domestic servant. He said he'd go to the city, get the job, and I'd stay home to care for his parents. But nobody in the village believed him anymore. Not after the whole public drama, not after the Carter family got dragged through the mud for lying and exploiting 2 women at once. When I was delivering food to my dad in the fields that afternoon, I ran into Vanessa. Her clothes were wrinkled, her lips were swollen, and she looked like she'd just crawled out of the reed marsh again. She saw my steel plant uniform and her face twisted like she'd bitten into poison. "Claire," she hissed, "you're back? Why didn't you marry Daniel? Do you know how much you've ruined our lives by not giving him that job?" I blinked and took a step back. "If you were me," I asked calmly, Would you have chosen Daniel over a lifetime job with benefits and a future? Her eyes flared like she'd found hope in the middle of her bitterness. Do you still like him? She asked desperately. If you do, let's trade. I'll divorce him right now, and you can marry him. Just give me your job at the steel plant. Please, Claire. Deal? And that was when I finally understood how deep the delusion ran. I couldn't help but laugh. You think I'd trade my hard-earned job for a man who can't even keep a mistress happy, let alone a wife? Newsflash, Vanessa's boyfriend's a veteran, and he works for the Public Security Bureau in the city. You really think Daniel compares? Her face fell, but I didn't stick around to watch it crumble. I turned and walked away, because I knew the kind of woman Vanessa was: selfish, greedy, calculating, and with that information, she'd chew the Carter family down to the bone. And that's exactly what she did. When I got to the fields and saw Daniel bent over harvesting rice, I nearly choked on my laughter. In our past life, by this point he was a rising young cadre in the steel plant, dressed in polished shirts, taking Vanessa on strolls through the park and to weekend movies, showing off his city charm. Now he was bent under the sun, spine curved, hands swollen, face pale and malnourished. I smiled and called out, "Hey, Daniel. How's life?" He wiped his forehead and tried to act cool. You came back to visit your parents? You look good. Must be nice at the steel plant, huh? It is, I replied cheerfully. I'm so glad you and Vanessa ended up together, or else I'd be stuck at home with babies and miss out on all this. He suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree. Wait, Claire, you haven't married anyone yet, right? I knew you still cared about me. Wrong again, I said, turning toward my dad. Hey, Dad. I came back to tell you that the factory introduced me to someone. He's a retired soldier who works at the Public Security Bureau. His name's Jason Moore. He and his parents are coming in 2 days to formally propose. My dad practically dropped his lunch and ran home to prepare for the big visit. Daniel just stood there, face drained, hands clenched, watching everything he once hated or thought he could still get slipped through his fingers. And when the day came, Jason showed up with his parents and their matchmaker, who turned out to be the director of the damn Municipal Public Security Bureau. Our village practically stopped breathing. No one had ever seen a government official smiling and drinking with a production team leader before. The entire town showed up to watch. I could hear whispers swirling like wildfire. Thank God Claire didn't marry Daniel. Look at her now, her man's from the Bureau, and the in-laws are from the Education and Health departments. She's set for life. Meanwhile, Daniel and Vanessa are still fighting in the fields over eggs and coupons. Someone laughed and said Vanessa used to strut around like a queen, but now she walked with a limp and looked like she hadn't seen a good meal in months. Another chimed in that Vanessa had been sneaking into the reeds with other men, exchanging favors for snacks and new clothes. Daniel's eyes burned red as the rumors flew, and then Znafe slapped Vanessa across the face. Just like that. Right there in front of everyone. The crack of Daniel's hand against Vanessa's cheek echoed like a gunshot through the crowd, and for a second, everyone froze. Even the nosy aunties stopped chewing their sunflower seeds. Then all hell broke loose. Vanessa shrieked, clawing at his face like a wildcat, cursing him for everything from being broke to being a lousy man in bed. You think I cheated because I wanted to? She screamed, her voice breaking as she scratched a long line down his jaw. If you made enough money, if you were worth anything, do you think I'd be crawling into the reed marsh with someone else just to get some biscuits and new shoes? She was so loud, I thought the windows might shatter. My dad and the uncles stormed out of the house to break it up, practically dragging the two of them by the collar back to the Carter house to avoid ruining what was supposed to be a celebration for my engagement. And that was the funniest part. While Daniel and Vanessa were airing their dirty laundry in the middle of the street, I was inside sipping tea with Jason Moore and his elegant parents, laughing softly with Director Mitchell from the Public Security Bureau like I was born to belong in this life. Jason's mom praised my work ethic, my dad beamed with pride, and the neighbors whispered that I had become the kind of girl people respected. The match was sealed with laughter and blessings, and no one even mentioned Daniel's name again except for the whispers outside about how miserable he looked, standing in the dirt like a beaten dog, while Vanessa, covered in scratches and mascara streaks, still wouldn't stop screaming. A few days later, word spread through the village like wildfire. Vanessa was demanding a divorce. She was done over it, finished with the Carters and their poverty, their shame, and their endless bickering. Of course, the Carter family exploded. They drained their savings and borrowed money just to marry her in the first place. They still owed relatives for the betrothal gifts, and if she left now, who'd pay the debt? Plus, there were 2 kids, yes, 2, just like in my previous life, and neither of them could walk yet because of how malnourished and neglected they were. And unlike before, there were no city salaries, no sugar coupons, no steel plant bonuses to fall back on. The Carter household had become a living nightmare. Mr. and Mrs. Carter begged Vanessa to stay, offered to kneel, to cook for her, to carry the children on their backs, but she didn't care. She was busy planning her next escape, already flirting with other men to secure a better deal. Daniel, meanwhile, lost his mind completely. He stopped working in the fields, sat at home drinking and smoking all day, and started using Vanessa like a pawn in his sick little revenge plan. I heard from someone in Team 2 that he had actually gone to find her new flings and cut a deal to rent her out for a few bucks a month like she was some kind of commodity. $3 a month, he told them. She's yours on weekends. He became a brothel keeper without the brothel. When she refused to give him the money, he beat her. Viciously. Repeatedly. And when she screamed, no one came to help her anymore. They were all tired of her drama, her lies, her crocodile tears. I heard she tried to run away once, but Daniel caught her, dragged her back by the hair, and nearly strangled her while shouting that if it weren't for her, he'd be in the city now, married to me, living the dream. He screamed that she ruined his life, that she was a curse, that she owed him everything. Eventually, Vanessa snapped. One night, she cooked dinner for the whole Carter family, laid everything out perfectly, and poured a full packet of rat poison into the soup pot. Daniel, his parents, and both children died that night. It was all over the village by dawn. No one even pretended to be shocked. People just nodded and said, it was only a matter of time. Me? I was already back at the steel plant, finishing my studies at the Iron and Steel College. I'd just graduated with honors and was selected to become a technical supervisor, something I never even dreamed of in my last life. I was married to Jason by then, and though we were both busy, we were happy. Our daughter had been born a year earlier, and we left her in the care of Jason's parents while we worked. His father, a respected education official, took it upon himself to teach her everything. She turned out to be a genius, reading before age 3, solving math problems before 5. People in the city called her a prodigy, and I felt something I never thought I'd feel. Peace. Looking back, I finally understood what that voice in my head had been screaming the whole time: never hand your future over to someone else, no matter how much you love them. No man is worth becoming small for. No marriage is worth suffering through in silence. No child deserves to be born into a house built on manipulation and resentment. You have to choose yourself, protect yourself, and love yourself first. Because when you do, the right people will come, and the wrong ones will destroy themselves trying to chase what they once had. That was the lesson I took from all of it. Daniel thought I'd be desperate without him. Vanessa thought I'd be bitter and alone. But I'm the one who ended up with a fulfilling career, a loving husband, a brilliant daughter, and a life so rich with purpose and joy that I don't even flinch when I hear their names. I used to think forgiveness meant letting go of anger. But not true forgiveness is living well. And I was living better than I ever imagined possible. The strange thing about karma is that it doesn't always hit when you expect it, but when it doesn't miss. After the Carter family was wiped out by that poisoned dinner, the village didn't even hold a funeral. No one brought incense, no one cried, not even the neighbors came by out of obligation. People just said they had it coming and went back to work. The commune recorded their deaths quietly, and Vanessa's name disappeared from the registry, like a stain being scrubbed off a clean shirt. Some said she escaped, some whispered she'd gone mad and was institutionalized, others claimed she fled to another province under a different name. I didn't care. As far as I was concerned, that chapter was closed. The man who ruined my past life and the woman who helped him do it were gone. What I had now was Raya's stable job, a supportive husband, a future worth protecting. And yet, every so often, memories would creep back and not out of regret, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. I saw women around me at the steel plant clinging to toxic boyfriends, tolerating disrespect, sacrificing their dreams for the sake of so-called love. I wanted to shake them, tell them what it meant to lose everything for someone who didn't see your worth. But they wouldn't understand, not unless they lived through it the way I did. Jason never treated me like I was beneath him. He didn't expect me to shrink, to serve, to be silent. He listened when I spoke, encouraged me to push further, and celebrated every promotion I earned as if it were his own. When I told him I wanted to take a technical leadership exam, he stayed up late quizzing me. When I got accepted into a national innovation program for metallurgy, he bought me a new pen and told our daughter, "Your mom is a genius." And she believed it, because in our home, women weren't accessories, they were the foundation. Meanwhile, back in the village, the story of the Carter family became a cautionary tale. Parents would warn their sons, "Don't be like Daniel Carter, who ruined his life chasing ambition through lies and manipulation." Girls would whisper in the fields, "Claire Bennett was smart, she escaped." It was almost surreal, hearing my name tossed around like legend. I wasn't chasing fame, but somehow, my refusal to settle had made me a symbol. One time, when I visited home during the spring festival, an old classmate came by with a gift basket. She sat in my parents' courtyard and asked, point blank, "Claire, how did you know to say no to Daniel? Everyone thought you were crazy at the time." I smiled and said, "Because I lived it once before." Of course, she thought I was joking. But maybe some part of her believed me. That year, the steel plant published my name in the quarterly honors for innovation in welding efficiency, and for the first time ever, a woman's name was engraved on the main recognition wall. Some people clapped, some grumbled, but no one could deny I earned it. I stayed late. I took the graveyard shifts when no one else would, and I never once leaned on Jason to get ahead. I built my place with my own 2 hands. At night, after our daughter fell asleep, Jason would pull me into his arms and whisper, "I'm proud of you," and I'd close my eyes, thinking about the girl I used to beta one who almost drowned for someone who didn't even care she was cold. That version of me was gone. She died the day I opened my eyes and said no to the proposal that would have buried me alive. As I moved up at the plant, I began mentoring younger girls who reminded me of myself, bright, overlooked, unsure whether they had the right to want more. I told them they did. I taught them how to weld, how to fix a jammed valve, how to negotiate for a raise. One girl cried after her first payday and said, "No man has ever made me feel this proud." I told her, "That's because real pride comes from what you build yourself." It wasn't about revenge anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything to Daniel or Vanessa or the villagers who used to call me plain. I was proving it to myself that I was worth the love I gave, the effort I poured into others, the loyalty I never received back. And every day I succeeded, I honored the girl who once thought sacrifice would bring her happiness. Around the 5th anniversary of my graduation, I was invited to give a speech at a regional engineering summit. I stood on stage in front of hundreds of people, men in suits, women in hard hats, government officials, and I told them my story. Not the part about the poison or the betrayal, but the part about starting at the bottom, about choosing the hard path, about not waiting to be chosen. "No one gave me anything," I said. "They just gave up trying to stop me." Afterward, a young female engineer came up to me with shining eyes and said, "You're the reason I didn't quit." That was all I needed to hear. I knew then that my story mattered not because it was tragic, but because I turned it into something powerful. Jason and I eventually bought our own home near the river, a small 2-story with flowers in the front and a vegetable garden in the back. Our daughter started piano lessons, then swimming, then robotics club. She told her friends her mom worked with molten metal, and they called me a superhero. Maybe I was. Not the kind with capes or powers, but the kind who survived what should have destroyed her and still found the strength to lift others. Life wasn't perfect. There were bills and setbacks, illnesses and missed deadlines, but it was mine. Fully, proudly mine. And I wouldn't trade a second of it for anything in the world, especially not for the fantasy of some ungrateful boy who once tricked me into thinking his love was a prize. If anything, he was the curse I had to break to become free. Years later, when I sat on the balcony of our home watching the sunset bleed into the river, I often thought about how fragile destiny used to feel to me. In my past life, I believed it was something handed to me, shaped by the man I married, the family I served, the sacrifices I made in silence. I thought being a good wife meant erasing myself. But in this life, I learned that destiny wasn't something to inherit, it was something to grab with both hands and forge like steel, through heat, pressure, and fire. I watched our daughter, Emma, run across the yard chasing butterflies with her school friends, her hair tied in pink ribbons, her laugh echoing like music. She had no idea how close I came to giving up on life before she was ever born, how I once stood on the edge of womanhood believing I had no worth unless someone like Daniel Carter decided I did. Jason came outside with a cup of tea, wrapped his arm around my shoulder, and kissed the top of my head like he always did when he sensed my mind wandering. "You're thinking again," he said gently. I smiled and leaned into him. "About how far we've come," I answered. He didn't ask for details. He never needed to. Jason wasn't the kind of man who needed to be reassured or impressed. He was just there, always present, always steady. He knew everything about Daniel, about Vanessa, about the things I endured, and the choices I made to escape them, and he never once judged me. He just kept building this life with me, brick by brick, minute by minute, believing I was worth building with. That fall, I was invited back to the steel plant for a 10-year reunion. They'd renovated the facility, modernized the tools, and added more female-led departments thanks to the groundwork I helped lay years ago. When I walked through the entrance gate, wearing a sharp navy suit and low heels, I was greeted by young workers who looked at me with admiration and curiosity, whispering to each other, "That's Claire Bennett, the one who rewrote the book." They didn't know the whole story. They didn't need to. All they had to see was the result: a woman who refused to be erased, who chose herself in a world that taught women to choose everyone else first. One of the engineers handed me a plaque recognizing my contribution to workplace equality and technical innovation. I held it in my hands, not for the glory, but for that quiet girl who once thought her whole future depended on marrying a boy from the village. That girl would have never imagined this moment. Later that evening, I took a walk by myself along the edge of the city. I passed by a noodle stall where a group of elderly villagers were playing cards and gossiping as usual. One of them, not recognizing me at first, said, "Remember that girl, Claire? The one who rejected Daniel Carter before he went crazy. She made it big. Married some high-ranking guy in the city. Has a daughter smarter than half the boys at the academy." I laughed under my breath and kept walking. Some stories didn't need to be corrected. They were better in the mouths of others, exaggerated with admiration and envy. I didn't care if people remembered the exact facts. What mattered was the shift. In my past life, people pitied me. In this one, they respected me. And that was enough. Jason met me at the train station the next morning with coffee and a warm smile. We sat together quietly as the train rumbled forward, carrying us back to the life we built, the daughter we loved, and the peace we fought so hard to deserve. I glanced at the mountains rolling by and thought about Daniel and Vanessa, not with anger, not even with sadness, just distance. Their names had become footnotes in my story, ghosts of a world I refused to stay buried in. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had healing. I didn't need to scream anymore. I had impact. I didn't need their validation. I had my own. And if anyone ever asked me what changed, how I went from an invisible village girl to a respected woman in the city, I'd tell them the truth. I stopped waiting to be chosen. I chose myself. I stopped begging to be loved. I loved myself. I stopped hoping for a man to rescue me and became the woman who rescues others. Every time I held a welding torch, every time I stood in front of a room full of doubters and proved I belonged, I was burning the old version of me to the ground and forging something new, something powerful, something mine. And if I could speak to that girl now, the one who stood in the freezing river, the one who sat alone eating coarse food while another woman lived her life, I'd hold her hand and whisper, "It gets better. You are not what they say you are. You are not what they left behind. You are what you decide to become." And I became everything they said I couldn't.